Welcome to the DawgNation Happy Hour, presented by Marlow's Tavern. A fun and laid-back look at everything happening around the Georgia Bulldogs and the latest UGA recruiting news there as well. Make sure you stop by the local Marlow's Tavern right there in your neighborhood and enjoy Happy Hour every weekday from 4 to 6 p.m. And now, for DawgNation Happy Hour, here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
Hello, Dog Nation, and welcome to our first ever DawgNation Happy Hour, brought to you by our good friends at Marlow's Tavern. I am your self-acclaimed happy hour expert, Kaylee Mansell, and tonight I am joined by our two guests. On the one hand, we have the man who puts the happy in happy hour, and of course the host of DawgNation Daily, Brandon Adams, and on the other hand, I've got the guy who probably can convince you to stay for just one more drink, even after happy hour it is over, and without question, that is your man, Jeff Sentell, right there. Now, as you know, this is our first episode of DawgNation Happy Hour tonight, so let's go over some light housekeeping rules to start with. Number one, and this is the most important rule of all, tonight is BYOB. And by that, I mean bring your own Brandon. We've already got one, so you've got to find one on your own. And number two, even though Jeff, Brandon, and I are here to facilitate the show, ultimately tonight is about you. We want the conversation to be audience-led. So what we talk about tonight is entirely up to you guys. Now, last thing here. The Zoom link is in the comments. So if you want to tune into the conversation, make sure to click that link in the comments. When you are accepted into the Zoom, make sure your microphone is off mute. And we want to know three things. Number one, where are you tuning in from? Whether it's your house, your local Marlow's, or you're hiding on the back porch from your wife so she's not mad at you for watching yet another DawgNation show. We want to know where you're tuning in from. Number two, make sure to tell us what's your go-to happy hour cocktail. I mean, it's the first DawgNation Happy Hour. We want to know what you're sipping on. And last one, have your question ready to go. Now, while we start to get you guys calling in, I want to turn it over to Jeff and Brandon, starting with Brandon. Brandon, what's your go-to happy hour cocktail?
Well, of course, I'm supposed to say the Finnish long drink, which I obviously love and enjoy all summer long, all fall long, and everything else there as well. And in addition to that, a little bourbon on the rocks, I can do a little brown liquor over ice. That's usually a pretty good happy hour thing for me there as well. So if I'm not necessarily going to be able to enjoy a Finnish long drink, a little bit of bourbon on the rocks, maybe a little scotch. Yeah, those would be my two probably happy hour go-to staples. And by the way, Kaylee, let me also say this as well, which is when I kind of facilitate and host some of these call-in shows, I'd say the batting average for callers, like having their mute button turned off and kind of ready to go when we call them, that's about 50%. So
Right.
If you bat 1,000 here tonight, if everybody kind of follows your instruction the first try, then I'm going to be really jealous because you've clearly achieved something in DawgNation status that I myself, after doing a lot of these shows in the past, will not have been able to be achieved.
I mean, if we bat 1,000 in this first episode, the bad news is that it can only go downhill from here. So I'm hoping that we get a few tonight that maybe I have to tell you otherwise. Because like I said, if we bat 1,000, how do we go up from here?
There's nowhere to go after that. You're exactly right.
All right, Jeff Sentell, tell me what you were drinking on during happy hour.
Well, I guess I could tell you the story of how one time in Jacksonville, I got Brandon to try this whiskey drink called Gator Tears. Because I know he would never turn one of those down. It's got whiskey in it. It's called Gator Tears. Yeah, sure, why not? But, I'm not even contractually obligated to say this, but I would probably say one of my favorite happy hour drinks would be kind of a signature drink at Marlow's. That would be the Blueberry Buck. I really like that. Brandon can confirm that, like, when we're out at events and we're at Marlow's Tavern, I'm usually going to have at least one Blueberry Buck there. Maybe just one, but I'm going to have at least one Blueberry Buck.
Here's the other thing, too, Kaylee, about being in a happy hour thing with Jeff Sentell. Pretty much every time it's time to order a new round, Jeff gets something different. Now, there's no way I'd be able to, survive if I had a different beverage every time we kind of got a drink there. But Jeff will go mixed drink one time. He may get something else the next time and then something the third time. Jeff never orders the same drink 2 rounds in a row, which I always find to be a little bit fascinating.
I figured that Jeff Sentell might be a happy hour expert enough to know that the saying is liquor before beer, you're in the clear. I mean, Pardon me, Jeff, but I'm pretty sure the older you get, the less you can mix liquor. Am I right?
I don't think so. I've done some field testing in that area, and I think that might be an urban legend to some extent. I guess the main thing you sit there and you go around is it's just like, I guess I look at my drinks kind of the way Kirby Smart does 5 stars. He's just got to go get another one from another state or another one from another shelf. A little variety. Got to have some variety.
Well, plus the other thing too is Jeff, being from like Gilmer County, when you say clear to him around the idea of some sort of happy hour or something like that, Jeff thinks about something that was made in the mountains there in North Georgia. That's when you say some clear, that's what Jeff's thinking about there. Some old school moonshine from up in the mountains of Gilmer County where he's from. That's what he's all about.
All right, guys. Well, it is finally time to bring on our very first caller of DawgNation Happy Hour. Let's bring on Randy. I know that Randy is dialing in from Tifton. I mean, what better person to start it off? Randy, tell us where you're zooming in from, your go-to happy hour cocktail, and what do you want to know, Randy?
Well, I'm calling from Tifton. Everybody knows that. And mine's just a good old cold beer.
I like it.
Up. You know me. But, BA, I want to know, what are you looking forward to the next 3 weeks? Because we know Saturday we got a recruit that's going to announce where he's going. Then we got one Sunday. Now it just broke earlier that the number 1 defensive lineman's going to decide August the 14th. So what are you looking forward to these next couple of weeks?
Well, Randy, I think that's a great question. And let me tell you something. I am thrilled to know the very first ever caller to the brand new DawgNation Happy Hour is Randy from Tifton, because I don't know that anybody sets the tone for these calls better than Randy does. So, Randy, there you go. You got the Power G right there in the hat. For those of you that don't know, Randy is both a longtime veteran of calling in our post-game show. He cuts a promo on these things on Saturday nights, which I love. Randy was also in the DawgNation Crews, so Randy's got a lot of points with me. You better believe that. And I got to tell you, in terms of what I'm excited about in the very near future, over the course of the next few weeks, I'm going to mention Nate Frazier here for a moment, because of all the recruits that we spend a lot of time talking about, and goodness knows I've talked to KJ Bolden until I'm blue in the face, and obviously when you think about like Williams and Warneri and things like that, you get excited about that. But I don't think I've talked enough about Nate Frazier, and maybe we've all been guilty of this a little bit, although I do think Georgia fans are kind of starting to talk about this a little bit more. Man, I think that's a special, fun-looking running back. I think this is a guy that if you can bring him in, pair him with Dwight Phillips, which you already have, running back you flipped from Florida not too long ago. I mean, I think that's a pretty big statement by Georgia running backs coach Dale McGee in terms of the kind of talent they're putting in this 2024 running back room here. So of all of the announcements we're about to hear, I don't want the one involving Frazier, especially if he chooses the good guys. I don't want that to go by the wayside here, because I think that's a pretty big deal, Randy. I really do.
Yeah, you're right, BA. Hey, listen, BA, I'm going to be in Wisconsin pretty soon, and I'm going to represent the real G.
I love it. I love it.
We ain't talking about no green G. We talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, baby. So you know,
I love it, Randy.
And I guess I'll fit right in with this right here. Anna's already up there, and she said the other night it was in the 50s, and I said, Lord, I wish I was up there. I'm in South Georgia, and with this humidity, you know, it ain't close to 50. It might be 50 times 2 or 3, but that's about it.
I hear you, brother. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, go up there, way up there in the Great White North. Show them what that real G's all about. Aaron Rodgers is gone. You know, Brett Favre's not walking through that door. The only G that matters is the one right down here in Georgia. You make sure you tell them that, Randy.
Hey, BA, one more thing. If anyone wants to go on that DawgNation Cruise 2024, you better hurry up, because it's filling up. It's filling up. We've been telling everybody, and everybody's going. So if you want in, you better jump in while you can, because we ain't going to have no more babies.
The check is in the mail, my friend. That is a perfect endorsement right there of what really is going to be a great time. You want to hang out with good dudes like Randy Tifton, DawgNation Crew's all about that. And Randy, I appreciate you being a part of our DawgNation Happy Hour here tonight.
All right, BA, go Dogs, and I'll see you soon, okay?
I appreciate it, Randy. Thanks a lot.
I mean, Brandon, does Randy ever have an unhappy hour? That's what I want to know, Manny.
What's up?
Randy.
Hey,
Randy,
thank you for them kind words the other night. He was doing his recruiting show. He mentioned me and Nestor, you know, from the cruise and everything. And, Tell Jeff, Anna said, you know, she's full-blooded Italian. She could have told him where to go everywhere when he went on his vacation.
There you go, right there. Should have given him some restaurant recommendations, Randy. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
All right. We'll see y'all soon.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm with Brandon right there. I think that we need to pull the recording of Randy giving out the shout out to the DawgNation crews and implement that into the show every day. Randy's somebody that I see in the comments all the time on DawgNation Daily, and I don't think that anybody could have described that beard to me and I would have known that it would have been done justice. I mean, that is a Duck Dynasty work of art right there. Randy, so glad to finally be able to see your face, and thank you for joining us as our first caller on DawgNation. Now, we just got the opportunity to hear Brandon touch on Nate Frazier's upcoming recruitment this weekend, but I do want to turn it to Jeff. Double commits this weekend in KJ Bolden and Nate Frazier. Jeff, you are the expert on recruiting here. Do you have anything to add to what Brandon said?
First of all, I got to say this. Is that not the definition of an Uncle Jesse from Dukes of Hazzard beard, Brandon? I mean, you and I remember that show growing up. That is one of those really that's one in Gilmer County that would fit in pretty well. Everybody's going to talk about KJ and about Nate. I think Nathan Frazier is very interesting because he's still going to make a decision this weekend, and he's got an official visit still left in his back pocket that is scheduled to the University of Georgia in September. So would be very curious. I'm going to choose that word carefully. Be very curious if, I don't know, he chooses Oregon or Texas A&M or Alabama and then still goes on to visit Georgia later on. You see a lot of goodwill. You see a lot of that positive social media energy, happy hour energy, I would say, regarding Nate Frazier and the Dogs. I think if he chooses to join the three-headed monster, you want to call it the three dog Saturday night, three running back, really impressive prospects, really all-around, all-purpose back prospects. Nate Frazier has some kind of DeAndre Swift-type skills. And then everybody wants to know about KJ Bolden. And I'm going to say a lot about KJ Bolden. I'm probably going to say a lot on Brandon's show tomorrow. But I think this is worry and anxiety season. I think the recruiting industry is doing things exactly as they should when 3 or 4 fan bases think that's going to be their guy or they're going to pull a shocker. I've said this for a while. I felt this way for a while that Georgia maintains a very strong potential position there with KJ Bolden.
Yeah, and what I talked about with KJ today on our DawgNation Daily program, Kaylee, is that for Georgia fans, this is more a source of curiosity than anything else. They're curious, can Georgia actually go into Gwinnett County and win with a player of this caliber? Is NIL this big of a factor now where Georgia could have this long-standing of a relationship with someone like KJ and have that kind of fall by the wayside late because a program like Auburn or Florida State wants to money whip them here? I mean, that's kind of what I think this really stands is Georgia fans, I think, know they're going to be good, whether KJ comes to Georgia or not. But there is massive curiosity about a couple of these, I guess, kind of looming narratives that kind of hang over the KJ Bolden story right now.
Well, before we move
Brandon,
on.
I think.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. You got it.
I got one thing, Brandon. The one thing nobody's talking about in the recruiting industry, and you and I had a laugh about this maybe a year ago, but there was a certain, I guess I would say a fast food establishment that had to be where KJ Bolden was going to school, or he was not going to go there. And that was NIL before NIL. And I'll let you, and I know we don't give away plugs here on our shows, Brandon, but for that one, there is one school that everybody's got the chatter that it's going to be this school. And if you look through the locations, that certain fan favorite breaded chicken joint, there's not one of those in that particular market. So,
well, there you go.
So
that may be all you need to know right there.
Before we bring in our next caller, I kind of want to add to what Brandon was saying. I couldn't agree more, especially regarding the KJ Bolden decision. I think that the reason that the hype around it has been so real is because he has done such a good job of keeping it a secret. I mean, there might be only one person out there who really knows, and it's really not like that nowadays with social media. Usually somebody has an inkling or somebody has a guy, but not really in this case. But what I think people are forgetting is that regardless of what KJ Bolden decides to do, we still have the #1 recruiting class, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So even if the decision doesn't go our way, I don't think that DawgNation needs to be down on that just yet. But with that being said, let's bring in our next caller. Here we have Scott Green. Scott, tell us where you're coming from, what are you drinking, and what do you want to know?
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on. calling
So,
from
Kaylee, you
Marlow,
should
Georgia.
know, and before you move on, you should know this is the legendary Green Soldier here, too. So,
Yeah.
tonight, Kaylee, for your very first ever show, it is just a cast of thousands, one celebrity right after the other. Randy from Tifton, and now the legendary Green Soldier making his appearance there as well. So, you have made quite an impression, Kaylee, to have this kind of star power calling in on your first show.
I appreciate that, BA. So I'm actually getting ready to go run. I know that storm came through North Georgia, so I'm drinking water tonight, but typically a little bit of Jameson on the rocks will do me just fine. A little Diet Coke, little Coke, depending on how I'm feeling. One of the things I just wanted to caveat with the KJ Bolden story, I think Georgia's able to sell NFL will always trump NIL. And I think Georgia, like everyone here on the panel agrees, Georgia will be fine regardless of what happens. And one of the biggest questions I had for BA and Jeff, and because I value y'all's insight so much, what are you really excited and looking forward to out of this team? And what is the biggest question mark about this team going into the season?
Well, Jeff, I'll go first if you don't mind. My biggest excitement is I think on paper, this is the best crop of wide receivers to start a season. I think that maybe I can remember Georgia having. Obviously, individual guys throughout the years maybe would stand head and shoulder here. But when you think about what you bring back with Ladd and what you bring in transfer portal via Dominic Love, and I thought that Connor Riley had a really fun practice note on Dominic Love today, which I thought was really interesting. And, you know, you just think about obviously you almost count Brock Bowers wide receiver there too, that when it comes to delivering the football to really pretty productive pass catchers already in their careers, this looks really good on paper. Now, for me, same side of the ball, I think my biggest question might be what happens at running back. And that's not because I don't expect it to be very good. I mean, the truth is Georgia's really very good at every position across the board. But, you know, that's the one group I think that's probably proven the least. That's the one group going back to spring practice and G-Day we probably saw the least. And I think the hope here is, hey, if the passing game is as effective as I think that it might be, then that maybe creates opportunities for the running game. But in terms of the level overall proven production, at one point in time, you would have thought, well, Georgia's going to have that at running back, may not have that wide receiver. But on this particular team, it seems like that's been flipped a little bit where, hey, there actually is, either because of transfers that you brought in or guys like Ladd or Marcus Rosemy-Jackson who decided to come back, there actually is a good bit of proven production at receiver. There's a little bit less of that at running back right now. So that probably stands maybe as my biggest concern for the team on really either side of the ball right now. What's going to happen when Georgia chooses to run it? Jeff, how about you?
I kind of think everybody remembers the term, I kind of look at the wide receiver position. I love the Carson Beck story because it's perseverance, it's waiting in the wings. Carson built the 2020 class largely to kind of get the guys to play together with him, Kendall Milton, Tate Ratledge. But here's one for you, Brandon. I think the passing game might be so strong that fans might say, throw the ball, Bobo, because it's going to be so strong. And maybe the one thing that I'm really probably most looking forward to is just to see Brock Bowers at his best, maybe the most brilliant season for Brock. I think one of the things folks don't realize about Brock is he's looked so good for so long, but he's usually been covered by guys 1 year, 2 year, 3 years older than him. And now Brock is going to be as physically mature as almost anybody that's trying to guard him. And I think that's probably going to be the best, maybe a signature year for Brock Bowers in the Georgia uniform. And the worry is I don't know what Georgia's defense looks like if they don't have a special player hop up on defense. And I think that's Mykel Williams. I think that's the one guy people will point to and say that's a top 5, top 10 draft pick. And I think beyond that, you know, you always had guys. You had Nolan Smith last year. You had Jalen Carter last year, especially up front in the box. And I think there's not that kind of second guy to go along with Mykel Williams right now, at least not proven. I think Nazir Stackhouse is going to be great. I think, unfortunately, Dog fans are going to have to live with that their defensive lines and their front seven is just 1 or 2 notches above everything else in the SEC rather than 3 or 4 notches.
Scott, how would you answer your own questions?
Unfortunately, Scott is hopping off the call. He listened to my directions. He knew that once he asked that question.
That's right. Hey, yeah, you're right,
But
Kaylee. He's listening to you. See, I need you to just follow your guidance because clearly Green Soldier is following orders. He's used to following orders in our great armed forces, and so clearly he's doing that exactly as you told him to do.
I'm not going to lie. Scott had me at Jameson on the rocks, and then I kind of lost everything after that because I just started thinking about that in honor of DawgNation Happy Hour. But I will say we do have another guest ready to come on board. This is Darian Ford. Darian, where are you tuning in from? What's your go-to happy hour drink? And what questions do you have for the DawgNation staff?
Good evening, guys and ladies. Go Dogs.
By the way, Darian, another one of our YouTube legends. Darian's been on YouTube for a minute now, so it's good to have him as part of the program here today, too.
Thank you. I started on DawgNation, then moved to Facebook, then YouTube eventually. But calling in from Macon. How y'all doing tonight?
We're doing great, Darren. I like that Braves hat, by the way.
That's right. How about chop on and go Dogs?
Yes, I love it. You got the World Series logo, the National Championship logo. It's been a good time to be a sports fan here in our state now for a little while now.
I know it, right? My go-to drink is a Jack and Coke, a gentleman's drink.
There you go.
Classic. I feel like our defense is set. I feel like our offense is set. I'm just ready to see, like you just said, our wide receivers step up. Rosemary Jack Saint. We lost, A.D. Mitchell, but I want to see who can step in and be that third and fourth guy.
What do you think about that, Jeff?
Like it. I mean, it's kind of funny how remember we were looking back the 2019 LSU game, the 2020 season, and it was like, can Georgia get the receivers? And Kirby even implored it after a press conference. He's like, we need to get more special outside. We need more guys outside. He would always lay men after spring practices. We don't have enough receivers. We don't have enough depth. I mean, I think there's a lot of special pieces. I think one guy folks should get excited about is I think Arian Smith is ready to put all those stereotypes and all those worries and all the previous history about him to rest. He seems very mature. He seems very talented. He seems very fresh and healthy. And Brandon, if they can get him rolling and he is the number 3 or the number 4, and you got to deal with Bowers and you got to deal with everything else Georgia brings to bear, and Carson Beck or Brock Vandegrift or Gunnar Stockton behind that offensive line, cannot stress the OL enough, man. That's going to be the most veteran, best offensive line I think that a Kirby Smart team has ever had, going from tackle to tackle. And Beck's going to have a lot of time to find his guys.
Kaylee, really only one thing I would correct about what Jeff said there. He talked about bringing it to Bayer. This year, Georgia actually won't be bringing it to Bayer. Bayer's out in L.A. He's playing for USC. But everything else that Jeff said there is 100% right and 100% spot on.
Hey, I hope Bear is sitting well in that nice luxury apartment that we got the chance to see on DawgNation Daily. Now, while we wait on next caller, I do want to kind of turn the conversation to the start of UGA fall practice today. If you haven't already, make sure to check out Mike Griffith and Connor Riley's articles that they put up today on the DawgNation website for all the insight on everything that went down today. But one thing I want to start out the conversation with is Kirby Smart's going into his 8th season as head coach of the UGA football team, and I know that he was loud and over that microphone today telling those guys, don't tell me you're in shape. I want to see it. He was over the microphone getting after those guys. So, Jeff, Brandon, I kind of want to hear your insight on what does Kirby have to do in these first couple of practices to emphasize the importance of going for 3-23?
Well, first of all, I love the use of the catchphrase there. Very well done. And as far as like yelling that kind of stuff over the microphone, listen, my wife says that to me every day.
I was going to say that motivates me.
It's like, stop telling me what you're going to do. And like, why don't you drop a few pounds here? So listen, Kirby getting on these guys like that, I'm just as used to that as anything. But yeah, Jeff, it's fun, right? I mean, it's fun to kind of see back out there and, see this team pushing. And certainly there is seemingly no missing piece here, right? I mean, there's no hole on the roster. There's no position group. I talked about running back a moment ago, but that still would stand to be, certainly not a weakness by any estimation here. If you're looking at Georgia trying to, as Kaylee said so appropriately, go for 3-23, there's certainly no personnel issue that would seem to hold you back on that right now, at least the best that I can tell.
I mean, nothing at all. I mean, you could say like there's no All-American wide receiver, but they've got 4 potential NFL draft picks at receiver. Brandon, when can we ever say that? Maybe had to go back to days when Terrence Edwards and Fred Gibson and Reggie Brown were all on the field at Georgia to have that many potential NFL guys. I laughed at that Kirby comment. Like he's talking about how it's 66 degrees out here. And what are you going to do with some morning practice? I think he's going to try to find a way to turn the House of Pain internal thermometer up to like 80, 90 degrees if he can help it, because he wants to get his guys ready. He wants to get his guys ready for the the fires of September. And I like the comment. Brandon, did you catch the comment Broderick Jones had this week? Somebody asked him about the differences between Kirby Smart and Mike Tomlin. And he said Tomlin's kind of chill, kind of reserved, but he said Kirby has no off button. He has no mute button. He's always on you. It's almost like he's willing you to be great. He's willing you to succeed. He won't let you fail. And that's one of the things Broderick will always take away from his Georgia experience, how Kirby was not going to let those guys with NFL futures fall short of that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, too, where it's like, I don't live in Athens. So I don't get a chance to go to Georgia practice when the media has availability very much. But when I do, Kaylee, the energy is just so contagious because everybody's kind of flying around. They're going from drill to drill and spot to spot. And you do hear Kirby over the microphone, and it's the position coaches. They're in everybody's face there as well. And it's all just in the name of competition and being as good as you can be. Like, there's something about that. I know you played on teams growing up. I played on teams. Jeff did too. There's just something really, addictive about that, where you just love the idea of all these guys this time of year out there pushing as hard as they can, committing themselves to this goal. And when you kind of see that energy on full display, listen, I'm the last one in the world that would, be able to put on pads and be effective at it, but it makes you want to get out there and try just because of what a motivational force all these Georgia coaches really are.
I couldn't agree more. I think that energy is certainly contagious, and if you have a coach that radiates that sort of energy that pushes you, then it's going to affect not just the coaches, but all of the players around them. And speaking of the microphone, there were also 4 players who were able to get a hold of the mic today. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Javon Bullard, Ladd McConkey, Arian Smith. Brandon, what do you think those 4 players in particular having the microphone says about them and the leadership roles that they will take on as they head into this upcoming season?
Well, it says they're great players, and it says they're great spokesmen. And let me tell you something. I love nothing more than Javon Bullard saying what's been on the mind of every Georgia fan all year long, which is the whining that's been coming at Ohio State. It's time for it to stop. It's time for it to be done and over with. Bullard said today, if you're still talking about that play, that's not my fault, meaning the one that he hit Marvin Harrison Jr., basically the accusation that Bullard plays too rough. He's him saying, listen, if you're still talking about that, that's not my concern at this point in time. So good for Bullard saying what needed to be said there. And Kaylee, to your question, that's how come he gets picked to speak in moments like this, because he says the right thing at the right moment, exactly when it needs to take place. So Javon Bullard, I could not have been happier that he said what he said today. I can promise you.
I think the only thing that would have been more perfect, Brandon, is if Javon Bullard would have said, it's all right, man. I'll give you guys plenty of more hits to talk about in the 2023 season, because that guy brings the hammer. And I'm going to tell you, it goes all the way back to on the recruiting trail. We had him on Before the Hedges. We had him on Zooms when that was the only thing we could do. And everybody saw that fireplace in your house, Brandon, all the time, and they saw that beard on your face. Javon Bullard was a guy. He was SEC Media Days ready, but he was a junior and senior in high school in Milledgeville. Very impressive, always been very impressive. And I think the 4 that they trot out there, it says they're players, it says they're captains, and it also says that they've been conditioned to echo and parrot the message that wants to be out there for the 2023 season.
Well, plus I'll say this, the last time Javon Bullard went up against Ohio State, he separated Marvin Harrison Jr. from football. The next time those 2 teams play, Javon Bullard may play a part in separating Ryan Day from his employment, because I don't know how many more losses like this in very big spots Day and the Buckeyes can take before Ohio State fans themselves start asking the question about, shouldn't Ryan Day be winning some of these games? Shouldn't he be more competitive here? Stop losing to Jim Harbaugh. Stop making excuses for losing to Georgia. Stop putting, paint on your beard to make it seem darker than it really is. Stop doing all of it. Listen, that's a hot topic on DawgNation Daily. There's nobody at that age who has a beard that's that, free of gray. Everybody's got a little gray in the beard if you want to grow one, at that particular age. Stop doing those things. Stop making excuses. Good for Javon Bullard for calling out or not calling him out because he was asked the question, but basically saying what Georgia fans were thinking. Good for him for doing that.
I do have to say my over-under for Brandon talking crap about Ryan Day and Ohio State was about 20 minutes, so I actually lost this one. Brandon, I'll give you the win on that one, but now let's bring in Bryce Dixon. Bryce, tell us where you're calling from, what's your go-to happy hour drink, and what questions do you have for our panel here?
Just a murderer's row of DawgNation legends tonight, by the way. Good to have Bryce Dixon here.
Can anybody hear me?
Oh, yeah.
I sure can. Bryce, you calling from outer space?
Yeah, I am, man. I'm on another world right now.
That's
I'm
awesome.
just ready for football season, just like y'all.
You
What's
better
up,
believe
Bryce?
that's
What's on your mind, man?
So, what do you guys? What do y'all guys think about the QB situation? What do y'all think Carson Beck's going to do?
Well, but hold on. Before we answer that, you got to answer Kaylee's question about the happy hour go-to beverage.
I already know what Carson's going to do. That throw for like. What's that?
So before we do the quarterback thing, you got to answer Kaylee's question about your go-to happy hour beverage.
I would say the Angry Orchard.
Ooh, that's a
There you
good
go.
one.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
I
go.
like some Angry Orchard now.
I like that too. I like that too. So I'll give you I'll give you your answer here on Beck, at least from what I'm thinking. I could see Carson throwing somewhere in the neighborhood of 30-ish touchdowns. You know, as far as like the yards per game stuff, I'm probably not mathematically astute enough to be able to do that. But when you look at the overall, you know, when you look at what Stetson's done the last 2 years, I think that's a fairly strong template for what Beck can do this year. With the extra caveat of, I do think he's got the wide receiver talent, as we mentioned a moment ago. And I also think that Georgia's got the schedule here this year where it's like if you're just a 100-point favorite in a lot of these games, as Georgia is, it's almost like, you know, what else are you going to do besides turn up the passing game here a little bit? So, you know, putting up pretty big numbers, assuming Carson stays healthy and has the kind of season I think he's capable of having, you know, kind of breaking through that 30-plus touchdown number, 30 and above. Jeff, I think that's a real strong possibility for Carson.
Yeah, I think the numbers are 3,800, 4,000 yards maybe, especially if Georgia's going to play 14, 15 games. I think they'll play 15 games again. And I think you've got all these receivers. I'm just going to say it. Stetson Bennett didn't have the receiving core that Carson Beck's going to benefit from. He's not going to have the protection up front. I mean, Georgia had some great linemen in Broderick Jones and Warren McClendon, but you got to say Cedric Von Prawn's better. You got to say that Xavier Truss is going to be better. You're going to say Tate Ratledge is going to be better. You're going to say Amarius Mims, who's probably going to be a first rounder. Definitely going to be as good as at least as Warren McClendon was. And Warren McClendon, I think, was the most dependable lineman of the Georgia era. I got a great question for you, Brandon. Gun to your head, true serum in your veins. What do you think is the deepest position on the Georgia team? I think there's really three options, three spots on the ball you could choose from. Where does your head go on that? Deepest position on the team?
I guess it's probably tight end, right? Relative to the number of guys on the field at one time, probably, right? Inside linebacker, maybe?
Offensive line, linebacker, wide receiver. Those are all – I'd accept a lot of those answers.
Yeah. What do you think, Bryce?
Cornerbacks, for sure.
Okay. Wow. Good answer.
I think the cornerback position is pretty loaded.
What do you think, Kaylee?
I was going to say the offensive line group, but I definitely think that as the season starts and we get to see those transfer wide receivers and Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas come in, depending on what they do, my answer might change. But I agree with what Jeff said. I think that Carson Beck has the opportunity to put up major passing yards, especially with this wide receiver group around him. I mean, it seems like the opportunities are limitless. It's not a matter of who's going to get the ball, but I mean, you can throw the ball to everyone on that field and be just as confident about them grabbing it. So I'm going to say offensive line is our deepest group for now, but ask me that midway through the season, my answer might change at that point.
And so, Bryce, what I'd say about the offensive line is I don't know how deep it is relative to the other Georgia position groups, but how deep it is relative to the rest of the country's offensive line. There are, and I've been harping on this all summer long. I harp on a lot of things. It's one of the things I've been harping on. There are very few teams in America that can match Georgia's offensive line depth. I mean, this is a huge issue for a lot of teams really being aggressive in the transfer portal. SEC teams like Florida and Auburn, you know, think about what Ohio State has been trying to do in really both portal windows, trying to bring guys in. There is just a real lack of offensive line depth, even among, you know, very good teams in college football. So I don't know if the offensive line group for Georgia is deeper than the other position groups for Georgia, but is Georgia's offensive line depth deeper than almost any other team in the country? You better believe that's the case. It absolutely is.
But I think there's a couple of guys on Georgia's too deep, and I'm going to say Dylan Fairchild. I'm going to say Micah Morris. I think if they were anywhere else in the conference, they might be 2-year starters by now, or at least going into their second year as a starter. You got to remember, those guys were top 100 overall recruits. They're all Americans. They're not busts. They've just had dudes upon dudes upon dudes in front of them. And whenever they get on the field, people are going to be like, goodness gracious, because They're going to be ready to play. They're going to be healthy. And I think you're going to see a culture of Georgia. Carson Beck, I think, might start it, where there's a lot of guys that get 1 year at Georgia. They wait their 1 year, and it is a gangbusters year, which leads them to a very profitable pro contract.
I like it. I like it for sure.
All right, guys, as we are unwinding here and our first ever DawgNation Happy Hour is coming to a close, I want to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor, Marlow's. Marlow says happy hour every weekday from 4 to 6. And I know that everybody already has their go-to Marlow's happy hour order. I know I'm a personal fan of the fish tacos, but they also have some special happy hour menu items, including kettle chips, firecracker deviled eggs, or another one of my personal favorites, the Nashville chicken sliders. And I actually think I know, right? I mean, it's hard to go wrong with those. And I think that Jeff brought up this drink earlier. Make sure you try their Marlow's Tropical Blue, a combination of bare bones vodka, pineapple juice, blue curacao, coconut puree, and lime juice. Make sure to give the Marlow's Happy Hour a try any weekday from 4 to 6, and we hope you love it just as much as DawgNation does. Now, since the show is coming to an end, I want to turn it over to Jeff and Brandon. Do you guys have any final thoughts you want to put out there as the first guest of today's DawgNation Happy Hour? Brandon, what you got?
Well, I'll tell you this, Kaylee. I think you've done an outstanding job today. I told you this before. I'm so thrilled you're hosting this show because if you're hosting, that means I don't have to, which is always good news for me there on that. But honestly, I don't think anybody could have done a better job here. First of all the callers, they were unmuted. They were ready to go. You're getting them on. You're getting them off. They're following your instructions. They don't listen to a thing that I say. So the fact that they're all listening to you and doing exactly what you said, that just proves that you were exactly where you're supposed to be. Because I can promise you, when I've tried to corral some of these folks, it has not always gone as smoothly as it did for you tonight.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm kind of still thinking about deviled eggs for some reason because I'm a big deviled eggs fan. But I will say this, and this is a Quake take, as our good friend Connor Riley likes to say. If all the Georgia 2023 freshmen perform as well in their first game and this fall as Kaylee Mansell has done for us tonight, then Georgia's going to win another national championship. So great start, young lady. I look forward to many, many more to come.
Oh, guys, you guys are going to make me blush out here. That's so kind of you. Now, I want to thank you both for being the first two out here and for our guests that tuned in today. Thank you for not being on mute, giving us your tough questions, and just being present with us tonight on our first ever DawgNation Happy Hour. Now, tonight we had Brandon and Jeff, but I want to let you guys know.
Now, you do realize, I don't mean to interrupt you, Kaylee. I know. Now, first of all, you got to get used to this because people want to interrupt you all the time when you host. Trust me, I can tell you that. But yeah, you better realize this, that the rest of these DawgNation folks, Connor Riley, Mike Griffith, they're not going to be anywhere near as easy to work with as Jeff and I are. You know, Jeff and I think we're handpicked for this first show because we are, you know, the easiest to probably get along with here. You know, Mike and Connor, they're grizzled scribes. You know, they don't necessarily want to cooperate always. So I hope you're ready for whatever they bring to the table being just a little bit more difficult to put up with than what Jeff and I bring to the table on a night like tonight.
Well, you see, I figured that this three in particular was selected because I'm thinking if us three walk into a good happy hour, that happy hour is going to be terrified to see the three of us. So I figured exactly that's why you two were the first ones to join. But excited to have Connor Riley, Mike Griffith. I think they're going to be okay to work with. Don't give them a hard time, BA. They're your coworkers. But again, thank you to all who joined us tonight for the first ever DawgNation Happy Hour. Thank you to my awesome co-hosts tonight, Jeff Santel, Brandon Adams, Michael Carvel in the booth. Nobody does it like he does. And to everyone that tuned in tonight, we couldn't make this show happen without you. We will see you guys right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock for DawgNation Happy Hour, brought to you by Marlow's Tavern.